And we're back. And it is COMP305, and it's winter 2016, and it's week 8, part 2 of our broadcast. So last we left off, we were doing this application right here. It's COMP305 winter 2016 3D game demo. If you're behind, you can always find it online. Let's take a look where that is. If I go to GitHub, and if I look at Centennial, then I can see that there's a COMP305 winter 2016 3D game demo. That's the one you want to get into, so that way we are on the same page. Okay? That's the one. Okay, so that's one part. What I want to talk about today is continue with what we were doing here in Unity, right? And I want to talk about external resources like Blender or Maya, right? So we ended off last time we made this thing where we have a kind of a 3D view, right? And I can walk around, can knock into this thing, right? Jump up on it, right? I get a full look all the way around, right? And notice how as I can push the cube off, the world here, right? Depending on the speed I'm running with, right? I can continue pushing until this cube is fall over, right? I can knock into it a bunch of ways because my cube is a rigid body, right? So it'll respond to me knocking into it because I'm going to impart force on this thing, just like of course I can fall too. But the question I had for you is, how come when I fall off this thing, I don't see the other side of it? I don't see the other side of this thing. What's that called? When I don't see the other side of an object? There's actually a special term for it. Anybody? Come on, guys and girls. It's called backface culling. Backface culling, and backface culling is when we don't render stuff hot. The hat. It must be the hat, right? Backface culling is when you don't render the opposite side of the normal. Okay, so there's two sides. There's the normal face, which is the side that things are drawn on, and then there's the back face. And the back face typically doesn't have any. We're not rendering the back face, and this is to save rendering power, right, and to increase performance, right? So here on this object, if I was to in here in my scene view, if I just look underneath, you can see that there isn't a face underneath here, right? There isn't a face, and the reason for that is because this object, the way we render it is we don't render the object inside. Okay, that doesn't have to be the case though. What's the quickest way for me to fix this problem? I mean, again, there's a couple ways to do that, but remember that I've kind of put in a plane mesh for this one, right? That's what this thing is. That's why it's showing up like this, right? It's a plane mesh. One of the solutions would be to replace this plane mesh with a cube and make it fatter, right? Make kind of the cube like wider and everything else. Let's do that instead. So I'm going to get rid of my ground for a second, and I'm going to add back in a cube shape. So let's add in another cube, right? It's just like this one, but let's add a new 3D cube object, right? My 3D cube object I'm going to rename as ground. Watch me here. Here's my ground, right? And when I kind of go in here, here's my ground object, right? What I want to do is I want to make this as flat and as wide as we did before. And for people who have done this with me, just bear with me while I do it. Now the Y, this is on the Y-axis, doesn't have to be very high. I can change the scale here if I want. Here's the position. Let's position it to 0, 0, 0, right? But notice how I don't have control over the exact size of my object if I was to go over here, right? The size of my object from a scale perspective, right? It's taken care of for me. I don't have direct access to the size of my object. I can change the scale, right? And I can do it manually, but let's, for example, put the scale down to 0.1. So I want to make it very flat. Now it's still a cube, right? But it's very flat. It's a very flat cube, right? And now let's change this to, let's say, something like 32 by 32, right? Now you can see that it looks like a plane, right? Still a cube object. I'm still using a box collider, right, on it. Still using a box collider, but it's a cube. Now I want to pass in the same materials that I did before because I got this ground material. I can do the same thing I did last time to make it look very similar. And the one thing I'm missing now, because this is a box collider, do I need to put a rigid body on this thing? No. Let's see what happens when I do this now. If I did it correctly, it should be able to still do the same kind of stuff, right? I can't bang into it, but I can still treat it the same way as I did before, right? And if I fall off of it, so I'm going to fall off of it now. So let me run. And if I fall off, I still see the bottom, right? Because my object isn't a, it's not a plane anymore, it's a cube. And all I've done is I've taken the cube and flattened it out, right? Different ways of making a plane shape or place to walk. Again, one way, it's very efficient. The other way, it's less efficient, but might work better for you depending on what kind of game you're making. Example, if you're making a platformer game with 3D, which could be your project for this 3D project that's due, remember the first part is due Friday, and all I'm looking for the first part is your plan, what the game is going to look like, roughly drawn out in a wireframe saying, my character is going to do this. There has to be some kind of objective for your player. Maybe he's going to get to a door or someplace at the end, right? As an example. But you're going to have to kind of design your level this way. All right. So kind of outline, kind of give me an outline of what your game is going to be about. How are you going to score? And so on. There's lots of ideas you can kind of come up with to create a score and to do your game. The easy way to do it is to make some kind of maze game or obstacle course, okay, that you can definitely create, right? That's the easy way to do it. And then you have some traps, which are the hazards, or something that falls on top of you, right? Where if you trip over a collider that's on the ground, it's maybe some kind of edge collider or something, it's going to trigger an effect, a trap that's going to hit you. And if you can get around, away from it, then you won't get hurt. Also, falling would be a good thing. So something that would push you off the edge, like something like some kind of object that keeps moving in and out. It has a piece of animation that just does this. It moves in and out, in and out, in and out. And if you pass by it at the wrong time, it'll push you off the edge, right? And if you just like we did with our platformer, if you fall on a death collider, then your player loses a life and you get reset, okay? So lots of stuff that can happen with this thing, right? It's just a matter of how we're going to play into it, okay? So today I want to talk about, again, some of the things about how we can make this go. I want to talk about some external resources that we can use. One of them is the asset store, which is a very popular way to go. So if I go to, I want to look at the window asset store. Remember we talked about this briefly before. There are tons of 3D assets that you can download for free, right? You don't have to actually pay anything for a lot of these. There's ones that are paid for. There's also ones that are like, for example, like $10, like really cheap. And there's ones that are even cheaper, like $5, and some that are really expensive, like A-Star pathfinding, right? Which is basically the a very standard way of doing pathfinding with 3D. That's $100, right? So you can pay as low as like $5 or whatever, or even free. And there's some more expensive ones, like the Cinema Suite and so on. Unless this is what you're going to do, like you want to be a game developer, not sure that I would do any of this. And there's also some areas here that are top paid and top free. If I click on top free, there's some really good, stuff that's made from Unity technologies, right? So, so let's say, for example, if I was going to go to survival shooter, right? This is one of the ones that they kind of made up. It's kind of a 3D game, but they kind of have an example project here. What I don't want you to do is, I don't want you to give me back survival shooter. Okay, please don't do that. Please don't download the whole game with the scripts and everything else. You can download assets, which means if you want to download things like vehicles and players and all that kind of stuff, simple movement scripts I would accept, but don't give me the entire game. I'll figure it out, guys. Like I can look online and go, oh look, it's the exact same game. And don't make the same game. Don't use a tutorial and say, well, I was following a tutorial and I made this game for you. No. It's not going to be it. Don't follow some tutorial on YouTube to hand it in. Because I'll know, I've seen so many of them, guys. You're not going to be able to fool me, and that would be a very bad thing if you handed it in, right? So try and make your own. Make something of your own. It doesn't have to be. I've never asked in this whole thing a textured game. Okay, nowhere does it say add textures, animation, or anything like that in your submission. Remember, this is something you're going to make. This is your first prototype, if you will. In your project, that's where I expect everything to be fully textured, light, all the lights to be there and everything else fully rendered. Maybe there's going to be some animations for different things, and so on. That's in your final project. This isn't your final project. This is assignment 3. Okay, so don't go crazy. Don't kill yourself for this one. The first part of assignment 3 is due Friday. It's just a general plan that I want to see from all of you, right? On the week following, so next week Friday, you're going to hand in your first level, basics. If you look at the requirements, there's some stuff that's still going to be left out. And the final level will be due 2 weeks from then, which will be actually, if you look at the time frame, it's on Good Friday, right? That it's due, right? So I think that Good Friday falls on the 25th, right? So that, I mean, you know, you have to get it done by then. I mean, I probably won't mark it by then on the Good Friday or whatever because, you know, it's a holiday, but that's when it's due. Okay, any questions around getting where you're going to get your assets from the asset store? What are you going to get? So you can't just download a whole game and hand it in. Like, you know, hey, this is my game. And I don't want you, if you have a doubt, if you're like sitting there like, oh man, there's a lot of code in this thing. Should I let Tom know? If you say that to yourself, let me know. Because I mean, that's a good question in your mind. Should I let him know? Because there's a lot of code in here. That's a good, you know, indicator for you. Probably I'm going to say no. Probably I'm going to, because too much code already. I might say yes, depending on what aspect of the stuff you're including, right? But at the end of the day, you know, think about what you're doing here, right? You're handing in this. This is your assignment. This is not somebody else's assignment. That's number 1. 2. What about making your own assets? And how do you make them? You can make some simple assets, and we're going to do that today. So this is going to be a bit of the Blender hour, which we're going to do for COMP302. It'll be next week. All right. How do we do that? So let's pull out some stuff. Now, in order for you to do Blender, remember, I'm going to turn the lights down a little bit again. One thing to do when you do Blender is you need this extra little keyboard if you're going to do the shortcuts, or program the keyboard on your machine, right? If you don't do that, then you're not going to be able to do stuff for Blender very efficiently. Okay, so right now, if I go back to my my game, all I have is this little thing here, right? Yeah, I can build stuff in Unity, but remember, Unity is not a place you sculpt stuff necessarily, all right? If I'm going to do a terrain, a 3D terrain in Unity, yes, I can do it in Unity. But if I'm going to make assets, it's going to be in another program like Blender or like Maya, right? Now remember, Maya, Autodesk Maya, and Autodesk Maya LT, used for gaming, right, is a great thing to use to create your assets, right? And you can make very simple ones. Let's make a very simple one together. Let's make the maze for our maze game, huh? One part of the maze. This won't be the whole level. If you make this your whole level, it's no good, all right? So let's do this. Let's bring up Blender to do that. Okay, so a couple things we're going to do. We're going to bring up Blender. And here it is. And how do we make the maze? Okay, so remember Blender, just a recap of what this is. You've got a very similar setup to what you have. It's a 3D software program that allows you to create stuff. Do I need my cube in Blender? No. Let's get rid of it. All right, I don't need necessarily to see my lights right now. And in the outliner in Blender on the right-hand side, I have my lamp and my camera, right, that are in the scene. I can just turn them off so they don't seem to be visible. They're still in the scene, but they're just not visible. Guys and girls, if you want to take advantage of what we're doing, please, this is a do session. This is not a watch session. If you watch, you will miss out on what I'm doing, and you won't be able to do this for your own level. This is a shortcut to getting your level started, your game started. If you're going to do some kind of maze game or obstacle course, all right, this is the thing to do. All right, so what I want to add in here, I want to press Shift-A, and I'm going to add in a new plane. Now, I'm adding in a plane. If I was going to add a plane, does the plane in Blender have back face culling? The answer is yes. It's the same as what I have in the other game. But for now, we're going to add a plane because I have a plan, right, for the plane. The plan for the plane. All right. We're going to leave it as a plane because I'm going to rename these assets later. So please add a plane. Let's make this plane the same size as our grid here. Okay, so let's use the S key. And by eye, if I was to match it up, right, so it's about the same size as my grid. And if I look at the numeric transform here on the side, right, I can notice that the scale is 8 times larger. So if I just make the scale 8, right, that means I'm going 16 by 16 by 0. Guys, your game, if it's 16 by 16 by 0, that's just a real start. That's like one screen in your game, right? You need to have more than one of these. Think about the platformer we did, right? The platformer had more than one place that you can do stuff. This is only one example of what you need to do, all right? This is not going to take the place of you building your own level, all right? Or adding assets. Okay, cool. So this is this whole thing here, yeah? What I want to do here is I want to split this thing up, right? Because that's what we're going to do. So this is kind of a trick we're going to use. Now, on the left, notice that I don't have the ability to split it up right here, right? I want to go into edit mode. How do I go into edit mode in Blender? Edit mode. This is an object mode. You can click here if you wanted to down here and click it and make it go into edit mode. That's one way, right? But the shortcut key is the tab key. So click the tab key. Now, if you notice, notice how everything is orange here in Blender. Orange in Blender means everything is, everything is selected. We want to leave this as selected. If I deselect, it's the A button. If it's deselected like this, you want to select everything like this. Okay, so everything is selected. Okay, cool. Notice on the left, I have something called subdivide, right? This is inside my transform, right? So if I go transform and then there's the add section, there's subdivide. Let's click subdivide, please. Notice how right now I have 4 sections. What's actually happened is I've made this, my object, more complex because I've split it up into 4 quadrants, right? Here's the one face, second face, third face, fourth face with a bunch of vertices. This is, I can modify each of these things. Let's keep on, if you notice on the left here, number of cuts is 1, right? Let's keep increasing the number of cuts a little bit, right? And I want to tell you when to stop, right? So there's 4 cuts, there's 5 cuts, there's 6 cuts, there's 7 cuts, 8 cuts, 9 cuts, and if you notice 9 cuts is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 9 cuts is 10 by 10. Notice that? 9 cuts. Is everyone with me? Because if you're not with me, I'm going to go pretty quick after this, right? Huh? Oh. Shift A. I'm going to add a plane, right? I'm going to I'm going to start a new project, right? I'm going to get rid of my cube with the X button, right? I'm going to shift A to add a new plane, mesh. I'm going to use the S key to scale everything up to here to the same level. And notice when I go into my numeric transform, when I press the N key, that my scale is 7.9. I want to make that a strict 8, right? Just to make sure it's even. Which means my plane is now 16 by 16 by 0. 0 is the height of my plane, and that's why we don't see anything on the other side. There is no height to my plane. It's just a flat plane, it's sliver sharp. Okay. I want to not see my camera, and I don't want to see my lamp in the scene, but it's got to be there. I'm going to press the tab key to get into edit mode. Right? When I press the tab key and I'm in edit mode, everything is selected. If it's not, you can press A to toggle everything selected or everything be selected. Okay, cool. Now on the left, there's going to be this subdivide button on the left. Click it. Notice that there is only one division, one number of cuts. But one cut actually divides it into 4 because it cuts it in both sides, right? By the way, you could change that by specifying only a cut in one direction, but we don't want that. We want to move this number of cuts to 9, right? So I'm going to click this button, or you can actually type in there and type 9. That's fine too. And this is the number of cuts you have. You have 9 cuts, which means I have 10 squares for every side, right? So I have 10 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 10 on this side, and 10 on this side, and 10 on this side. Is everyone with me? Okay. Now that I have these squares, I want to press the A button again, right, to deselect all. Okay, notice how I have a bunch of these squares here, right? And this is where I want to start modifying my map. I want to rotate my maps. Notice that my little manipulator here, it looks like almost like a little, on the bottom left-hand corner of my screen, there's almost like a little guide that shows me where Y and X are, right? Remember that in Blender, Y is this way and X is this way and Z is up. Not like in Unity. Unity, Y is up, right? Same in 3JS. right? But here in Blender, notice that the Y is this way, right? So going up, and I've aligned everything so that X goes this way across the screen, okay? Horizontally, and Y is vertically. So Y would be forward and back, X would be left and right. That's what I've done. Okay, cool. So imagine if I'm making my map now, and if this was graph paper and I was mapping things out, right? I want to start somewhere maybe on the right-hand side. You can start wherever you like, and you don't have to match what I'm doing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Control-Tab, and I'm going to choose Face Select Mode. You can do it through this, or on the bottom, right, where if you notice on the bottom of my controls here, I just draw the controls, there are 3 different little cubes. One of them is Vertex Select Mode, the second one is Edge Select Mode, and the third one is Face Select Mode. I want Face Select Mode on, or you can press Control-Tab and choose from the little pop-up menu which one you want. Okay, Face Select Mode. If you have Face Select Mode on, you'll see the dot in the middle of each face. Okay? Yes? I'm just doing this, right? But for you, you'd have to press down in the middle of your mouse button, your middle mouse wheel, press down, hold, and drag one way or the other in your mouse on the mouse wheel. Okay? If you don't have a 3-button mouse, you're SOL, right? Get a 3-button mouse for Blender or for anything else. It doesn't take that much. If you want some person who's a touchpad person, you lose out. I told you at the beginning of this course, you need a 3-button mouse to do everything we're doing here, especially even for Unity. Get a 3-button mouse if you don't have one, okay? All right, so I'm back in here and I've rotated everything, right? And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna select certain pieces, certain faces, and extrude them. That's my plan, right? So I wanna start my character here in the corner. And by the way, from experience, I'll tell you that each one of these cubes or these areas here is probably worth, it's a very, very tight space. So I wanna kind of give 2 spaces in there, 2 of these squares. 1 square is about, I don't know, 5 feet if you're going to do graph paper, right? So I want to kind of do it so that I have, you know, kind of a wider hallway that I'm going to do. So I'm going to select this one first. So I'm going to right-click to select. Then I'm going to shift right-click to select the next one, and the next 2, right? Now, if you notice these, there's a if you picture this being the walls, this over here is the walkway. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep doing that. So if this is the walkway, I want to come to here. That means these ones should be selected as well. So I'm going to shift right-click these ones. Shift right-click, guys. So here's the hallway. I can go down this way, right? And by the way, you don't have to make them doubly thick. If I want to, I can make it a single thickness, but I want to make this a dead end if he comes down this way, right? So I want to add a couple of more lines like this, right? So there's my maze that I'm kind of putting together, right? Okay, here I want to add this one. I'm going to kind of add a block in here. Take a look how this looks here, right? And you know what? To make it interesting, I want to create a block that makes it a little bit more, you know, narrow over here. It's going to be kind of a narrow area over here, right? There we go. Now you can make it the way you want. Don't match it up to mine necessarily, right? But what I'm saying is just see what I'm doing. So he's going to come this way. He's going to see some walls over here, right? And then I want to get to this corner, let's say. I'm just making it up, okay? So I want to create a block that goes like this. By the way, you can rotate this thing if it makes it easier for you so you can see it this way, or you can press the 7 key, right? The 7 key to give you almost like an orthographic view of it, right? This is what the maze is going to look like. Okay, cool. I want there to be dead ends, right? So that way he can't just see in here and, you know, see where to go, right? So there's a couple ways I could do that. I could do things like put additional bricks like this to kind of cut this off. So he doesn't know if it's going to be this way, you know, where is he going to go? Maybe he's going to try this bigger room. Notice this could be a bigger room area. And I can also cut this off by putting a wall around this area, right? Okay. So I can have walls like this, right? And I can have open areas like this. Okay, cool. So what am I doing? All I'm doing is selecting faces, yeah? All right, here's the trick. Press E for extrude. Notice that everything that I've selected, right? Everything that I've selected is now selected again. Press Enter or Return. Don't do anything else. Just press E and then Enter. What I've done is I've created additional points, vertices on top of the vertices. So I've duplicated the vertices on top of each other. So 2 sets of vertices. One that's on the bottom, and then now there's another set that just sits on top of those. Okay, now press E again. I'm just going to modify this, E, the E button again, and this time raise it up. Notice how if you raise it up, it becomes, you know, the maze that I'm looking for, right? Nice and easy. I'm extruding the maze out here. Okay, now if you don't know how big you want to make this, not to worry. If you notice on the left-hand side here, I mean, I'm talking about right over here, the left-hand side, right? By the way, you can sink it in as well as pull it out, right? But we want to pull it out so that it's at least 2 of these things high, right? So right now, from a height perspective, so if I go down to here, this is 0, and if you notice on the right, it shows me that I'm about 1, and I want to go about 3, right? Something like this. Okay. Okay, here it is. Now, if you notice the scale, right? Now everything's still selected, right? So if you notice from a scale perspective, and if you've made a mistake, guys and girls, don't worry. You can go back and fix this again. It's not a big deal, right? But I mean, notice here on the, from a vector perspective, I've increased everything on the Z only to 3.375. Without moving away things, I can still fix it. I can still go back here and change this to exactly 3. Okay? You moved it around, then you have to undo everything else again. Okay, cool. Notice that I can also constrain axes. And in this particular case, my axis was constrained on the Z, which is what I wanted. If I didn't constrain my axis, it would be like all floppy all over the place, right? Okay, let me do that again. For some people didn't get it, right? So I'm gonna undo. It's flat. I'm gonna undo again because I also created extra points. So number 1, if you're here at this step, is press E. Right? What this does is it's the extrude button. And what I want to do is press Enter to create additional points of contact. All right? And then I want to press E again, right? And I want to raise it up, right, to approximately what looks like 3. And if I can see on the left-hand corner, there's a numeric representation, which is happening right there. See on the left-hand corner here? Which tells me approximately how tall I'm going, right? And I'm going to press left-click to stop it. So right-click, left-click moves it and stops it. Yes. Okay, now I want to fix this amount to make it equivalent, exact. I'm going to kind of click in here and press 3 and press Enter. So it's exactly 3. Cool. All right. So now here's my maze, right? And it's pretty boring, right? It's pretty darn boring. I want to get some texture going on, right? Yeah. Well, if I click away, like let's say, for example, I click here, right? I could make this one, that one, 4. Let's say, for example, if I want to make this 4, then I could do that, and boom, it grows, right? See how, because I'm still clicked in there, right? So let me do that again, kind of from the beginning. So E to extrude, Enter, E to extrude, up. I want to select exactly what it is. So it's going to be 3. It's going to go back there and press Enter. Right now, if I click away, if I move out of this mess, and if I deselect all, so I press deselect all, right? Notice how I can't do that anymore, right? If I click on 1, right? Notice how I don't have that option anymore to kind of move everything up the way it is. I'd have to extrude by itself again. And this is kind of a trick you can use. Like, for example, if I wanted to make it so that I can connect these 2 areas to make an arch or something like that, I can do that, right? But that's just me extruding stuff together and piecing things together and whatever. We're not going to do that right now. Okay, what we're going to do is with this little maze or hallway that I created, this could be one block. Think about this as a building block for your entire game. You can make several of these that you stitch together, all right? Well, let's make this one, okay? So now what I want to do is I only want to select, all right? I only want to select certain parts of this thing, okay? For example, I want to select the walls, I want to select the ground, and I want to select the, the ceilings or the tops, the rooftops, if you will. Okay, let's do the rooftops first. Right, so I'm going to select all the rooftops one by one. Right, so shift right click, shift right click, shift right click, and I want to select them all here. Now, there's other ways of selecting. You could use, you know, different selection methods like the B select mode or whatever, or C select mode. But we're not going to do that. I'm just going to connect right click. Okay, good. So I've kind of selected everything. Yay! All right, what I want to do is I want to separate this whole thing out to make it a separate object from everything else. So how do I do that? I'm in edit mode, right? So what I want to do is I want to split the objects away. Now, if I go to mesh, if I don't know what to do, sometimes it'll tell me what to do here if I want to split or separate the objects away from each other. It's not bisect. Don't do that. And it's not normals. I'm not going to recalculate normals or create, do my edges or my vertices or anything like that. But take a look here. I have something called split. That's why. That's not the one I want. If you do split, it'll split the vertices apart. You don't want that. I want to separate these objects apart. And I believe I think it's Control and J, if I'm not wrong. And if it's not Control J, by the way, if I deselect it, if it's not Control J, then it won't work, right? So let's find out what that is. It's not Command J either on the Mac, right? So let's find that out. So if I don't know what it is, I want to separate stuff. I can always go to the Blender API and ask. So I can say something like, separate object edit mode Blender. And maybe they'll have something like that. Edit mode Blender reference, split an object from edit mode Blender. How do I do that? And it'll give you the hotkey and how to do that here, right? It'll say, hey, here's what you do. You press, this part, whatever you're looking at, and it says press F9. Select one of the objects, press F9. Now look in the links materials panel at the left, and you'll see the same mesh just to the right of the field. Now we don't want to do that. That's not the way you do it. So there is a way of doing it. You can separate with a split or separate. Subdivide, splitting piece of a mesh into a new object. That's the one I want. And it says press the P button, right? P button, right, to separate. Okay, so let's go back. That's the one I want. So press the P button. It asks me how I want to do it. I want to do it by selection, right? So by selection. And now what's happened is, look, it's become all smooth. And now on the outliner, this is the key tell here. I have two planes. I have one that's selected right here on the outliner in object mode, and I have another one that's the rest. Okay, take a look at this one. If this one's selected, if I go back into edit mode now, I see the faces, but the other ones I don't see the faces. This is because plane 001 that's been created here is now the rooftop of the other plane. It's still there, but for me to test it, to show you what I'm talking about here, right? If I want to move this object around, right, I can press the G key to show you what it is. So I'm going to go back into, again, if I select the object, so here I'm in my edit mode, so I'm going to go back to object mode. I can move the top of the roof away now. See, it's actually, I move the top away. The box is separate. See? Yeah, undo. So now they're together. All right, so that the roof is now separate. Let's do the same thing, right? Let's do the same thing for the floor. Let's rename this thing. So this is roof. So we're going to rename this one roof. Actually, what I'm probably sure is if you want me to show you that again, right? I'm pretty sure you're going to see. You want to see that again, or else you're not going to be able to do it. All right, so let me undo that. So I'm going to undo, 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 undo. There. I'm flat again, man. What the hell? One thing you can't do with Blender, and this is okay because I can get there. I can get there pretty quick. One thing you can't do is redo, right? You can't sit in there and go like, let's go back to get that stuff back. You can't get it back, right? But that's okay because I know what to do. So again, just to show you everything really quickly for the third time, which is fine with me, I'm going to subdivide this thing 9 times, right? By the way, I've done this many times, so it's okay. And now if I start selecting, I'm going to Shift Control Tab to get into face select mode. Select the areas that I want that I think are going to make this thing more interesting. By the way, you can always deselect the stuff you don't want, as an example. And let's say I'm making a couple of longer or smaller rooms, but it's going to be a little different than what I did last time. There we go. And maybe make this one kind of do this. So maybe you have to go in here and check that out. And so I've got this area here that's a little bit bigger. Let's add these ones in there too, right? And then maybe make another one over here. Maybe I don't want that one. Maybe I want this one or this one. So you have a little bit of a corner, right? So that you kind of do one of these. And maybe something else over here to make it more challenging for you to find the end, right, to this one. There we go. So it's a little different than what I did last time. Guys, it doesn't matter. This is your game, right? Cool. Now I'll press E for extrude and enter. E again to extrude up. I want to choose the level. It doesn't matter. And change this number here, right, to 3. Yay. Now, what I want to do with all this stuff selected, just the tops, press P to separate and make it its own selection. So now it's this own thing, which is this rooftop right over here. So this is roof. I'll call it rooftop. Doesn't matter. Okay, rooftop. Good. Now I want to go back into this plane. Now this is part 2. Now you're back to me again. All right. I want to go back to this plane again, and I want to select. Now there's 2 ways of doing this. I could select the outer walls, right, and forget the ground plane. All right. That might be the quicker way to do this because the ground is a lot, but it doesn't really matter how you do it. I'm going to press Tab to get in to edit mode. And again, all I care about is the floor. I don't care about the walls at all. So don't touch the walls. If you touch the walls, it's going to make it more difficult for you. Press 7 to look at the top view. And what I want to do is I want to go into ortho mode so I don't see the tops, which I press 5 to get there. It's actually 3-dimensional, right? What I've done is I press 7 on the number pad key, right? And 5 to go from perspective to ortho mode, right? Once I've done that, you see this. Okay, now, so that way I don't have to choose anything else, right? Now this is great. Why? I can use circle select mode. So I press the C button, and if I'm careful, I can do something like this, right? As opposed to hitting the walls, all I'm gonna get is this floor done like this, yeah? So by C, I press the C button to do that. Okay, if I look at it, none of the walls should be selected now, just the floor, right? Just the floor is selected. Okay, let me show you that again. Huh? Deselect everything? Okay, deselect everything, go into ortho mode. I'm not gonna be here, I'm gonna be flat. Then I'm press C, the C button, right? Which is gonna give me my circle select mode. I can increase the size of my circle by scrolling in and out, right? I wanna make it fairly small, so it's not too big. And what I want to do is just select everything at once here by just using my circle select mode to do that, right? It's basic modeling stuff that I'm doing, right? So this is a quick way of selecting my ground, right? So I've got everything, huh? C, circle select mode. Okay. What you can do is click, right click, shift right click if you want to. Okay, now that I've got this selected, I'm press escape. I've got all these selected. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to press P to separate it. Press P. I'm going to go by selection, and it's going to be gone. Now I have a new one, which is here, this one. This one, right, is going to be called the ground or the floor, right? Okay, let's go back into my regular one, this one. This is for the regular one that's left, all right, my plane. If I press Tab to go into selection, now if you notice, all I have in here is the walls. Well, this is great. All I have to do here is press A for all, right? Select everything here. Right? These are all my walls, right? So this, if I press Tab, this plane that's left over is my wall plane. Here's my walls, right? Walls, my rooftop, and my floor. Okay, now that I've got those, guess what I can do? I can apply a different texture to each one, right? Let's do the floor first because the floor is cool. And where am I going to get my texture? I want to get it from somewhere online, right? So I'm going to go up. I'm going to go to cgtextures.com. This is where I'm going to get it from, CG Textures. And this is just for illustration purposes for those people who are looking. I'm not using it to sell anything or whatever, my disclaimer for today. I'm going to click on ground, so cgtextures.com or textures.com. Click on ground. Notice that there's a bunch of different kinds of ground. I'm going to pick cobble, right? And inside cobble, I'm going to pick the one that's colorful, which looks like this colorful gravel, right? There's 2 you can pick, this one or this one, doesn't really matter to me. You pick one that you like. Okay, cool, hey, there it is. So I've got this one. Notice that I have a bunch of free, if you sign up, there's a bunch of free credits you can get here. There's also a larger one. Remember I told you, the larger one, the better, right? When you want to do this stuff from a size perspective, right? There's ones that are really large, but I'm going to just choose the small one, this 1024 by 1024. It's a square. If this one was a square, I would probably have chosen this one. Like for example, if this was something more squarish, like 2800 by 2800, I don't have premium access, so I can't do that. I'm going to click this. So I'm going to download this one, and I'm going to put this gravel cobble 0017-1 on my desktop. So I'm going to go to my downloads on my desktop, and I'm going to put this one on my desktop, this gravel cobble. By the way, when I'm finished, it'll be up on GitHub, right? So don't worry if you don't get this one. But I've gone to cgtexture.com and I've downloaded it. You can download a texture from somewhere else. I'm I'm just using this gravel cobble one. Okay, so there, I've got it. Yay, I've downloaded that one. Okay, I want to download a couple of other ones. So that's the floor. I want to get the wall and the top of my roof as well, right? So from the walls, let me go back to the wall. Go back out a couple ways. I have this brick wall. I want to use concrete for the top of my roof, right? Maybe grunge, something like that. And brick for this one, all right? Now they're all going to be different. So watch. Here's brick. Now I don't want to use this brick wall because I'm making a dungeon, right? I don't want to use this one or this one. These are too common, right? But this one, medieval brick, looks kind of cool. Even the rounded brick or something else looks cool too. Click medieval brick. And I noticed there's a couple of different medieval brick types, right, that you can choose. Lots of different textures. Really, really cool stuff. I want to choose something that's a little bit uneven like this one, just to make a point. Okay, notice that there's many more textures in here that are uneven. I'm going to choose the first one on the left, just to make it easy. And I'm going to choose the one that's around 1024 by 1020, something more squarish. I'm going to click that to download that one too. Okay, I'm going to put that on my desktop. You choose one that matches what you want. Okay, cool. So I've got that's my walls. Now I need my rooftop. And my rooftop, I want to make it look like some kind of grunge or broken something, right? Let's see if that makes any sense. My grunge maps, here's crackles. Maybe there's a bit of crackles, so it looks like it's a cracked up kind of rooftop. I'm gonna look at this little here, this one here. You know, and this looks pretty good. I'm gonna use that one. Okay, cool. So let's grab that one and then download that one. Crackles. Yay. Okay, so I've got 3 different textures. I want to apply them all to my objects. How do I do that? Remember, I'm going to bring this all into Unity after this, right? This isn't just the extra. The exercise isn't to play around with Blender. The exercise is to make something and bring it into Unity so I can use it, right? Okay, so I want to take care of my floor first. So I'm going to go to my floor tiles. This is what this is right here. And remember, I don't have any material. Can I apply a texture without a material? In Unity, can I do it? No. You need a material first. Everything requires a material. The material is the shell of your object. If you don't have a material, you can't do it. By the way, I went to cgtextures.com if you want to look at those textures, right? Okay, so I want to grab that. So where do I grab this? I'm going to kind of make my material what's it called? The 4th tab from the right here. I'm going to grab this one. I'm going to create a new material that I'm going to name by double-clicking. I'm going to name this as floor. I'm going to make it the same name, floor. I'm not going to use any diffuse color. I'm going to take away my specularity, though, and put that right down to 0, although I don't really have to in this particular case. Okay, cool. Leaving the shading alone, everything else. And you know what? I want to just, for now, I want to hide my other pieces so you're not confused, right? So I'm just going to go into this little eyeball here, and I'm going to take away my rooftop, and I'm going to take away my walls. So all I have is what the floor plan is going to look like. This is the floor, okay? Now, I want to apply a texture. Here's the texture one, the 3rd one from the right, right? So 1, 2, 3, right? This one. Notice that there's a bunch of slots for texture. I want to add a new texture. And what I want to do is I want to go with image or movie, right? That's the one I want. If I scroll down, I can open this texture that I just downloaded, right, by clicking the open button. This is under the image. So again, I've just created a new texture, right? My texture doesn't have a name yet. I'm going to rename this texture the same name as what I've downloaded, okay? But let's go and check out. I'm just going to go to another screen here, and I've got these 3 textures here that I've downloaded, right? Just to organize myself, because this is how it's going to come across in Unity. I want to name these things something else. So just clean up these numbers, right? So I'm going to say, and again, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to kind of clean this up so it says gravel cobble. There's the first one, gravel cobble. And I've got my brick old rounded, right? I'm going to clean that one up a little bit so that it's just, you know, has an even name, right? And this one here is crackles, right? So crackles. So get rid of this and try again. That didn't work somehow. There we go. Crackles. So I've got crackles, I've got brick old rounded, and gravel cobble. They're all sitting on my desktop right now. It's okay. We're going to fix this in a second. Okay, what do I want to do? At this point, what I want to do is this. We're doing a test. We're not actually going to apply this. It's going to be very difficult for us to bring this into Blender, or into Unity. But into Blender, this Unity. If I go back into Blender, what I want to do is I want to apply this texture to test it out. So this first one is gravel cobble, right? So I'm going to name this thing gravel cobble, just to keep the same. And I want to open that texture. So I'm going to click open. I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to see the gravel cobble texture and click open image. Okay, so I've got the gravel cobble texture loaded inside the gravel cobble slot that I've created. Okay, but it doesn't show up here. Why? I'm in object mode, yes, but I'm also, from a shading perspective here, notice the shader is the solid shader, right? This one here. I have to move from solid shading into material. Now I can see that there's something else going on here. I also want to move into the transform control here on the right. I want to scroll down until I go to shading, and I want to move from multi-texture to GLSL. Right, that's more realistic shading. Again, I don't have anything here, and there's a reason for this, right? I have to unwrap my texture, right? I have to unwrap my texture. I can only do this in edit mode, and this is not the best layout for me to do this in. What I want to do is I want to move from default layout to another layout called UV editing. I'm waiting for you guys to catch up. UV editing. If I click on UV editing, now I see kind of the same thing. I see this little map over here, and I see my map over here. Let's move this so that I can see it exactly how you saw it by bringing it up a little bit further. I'm going to kind of just scroll out a little bit here, and I'm going to kind of go into orthographic mode, right? So that's true. That's top perspective mode. That's top ortho mode. Notice on the left it tells you what it is. That's top perspective mode, right? And now I'm not seeing my map yet, but again, the other reason is because down here, notice how I'm in solid mode. I want to be in material mode, right? Again, not showing anything. That's okay. You're going to see it. On the left, I also have this other area over here, right here. See how there's a little image button. I want to select the image, gravel cobble, that I got over here on the left. Now, if the image appears, it's just a picture. That's all it is, right? Okay, cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll out so I can see the picture in more detail. Just a little bit bigger. Scroll out. So now they're kind of matched, right? Size-wise. Okay, here, I got to go into edit mode over here on this side. Remember, wherever my mouse is, that controls whatever thing I'm looking at. Here, I'm controlling this side. Here, I'm controlling this side now, just by moving my mouse over. So any kind of shortcuts applies to where my mouse is. Okay, here, I want to go into edit mode. So I'm going to press tab. Notice how I have all these faces, right? But none of them are selected. I need to select everything by clicking the A button. And now I want to press the U button to unwrap. So press the U button to unwrap. If I click unwrap, you'll see a mapping exactly one-to-one of whatever I have here, the cobbles, to what I have here. Now these are too big, right? Because if I look closely at what I'm going to get, if I press A for unwrap, or for thing, this is big cobbles, right? Doesn't look right. I want this pattern, but I want it to be a lot smaller, right? So press A to select all again. Notice here the pattern. I can do the same kind of transformations on my UV map. This is what this is, this UV map, alongside that matches up with what I do here with the actual objects. So here I want to scale this UV map so it's much larger, right? So I'm going to press S to scale, and now I'm going to make this UV map go. And as I make the UV map get bigger, the size of my cobbles get a lot smaller, and you can see how it's going to be. I'm going to kind of match it up so it's like that. Notice how it's much bigger. If you want to see the scale I put it up, you can always numerically look at what the size is by pressing the N key, which will bring up on this side, this is the numeric scale, right? It tells you how big it is. But I've actually scaled it up quite a bit by eye. Okay, so this is what it looks like. So if I press A to deselect all, and if I scroll in, this is a preview of what my floor is going to look like now, right? You see? That's pretty good. So from a floor perspective, this is what it's going to look like. Okay, cool. I've got my floor. I've got my stuff. Let me go back to my default mode. I'm going to go back to default now. Here we are back in default mode. Let's open these back up again and get rid of my my thing here, my numeric transform, and zoom in to see what I see on my floor. Okay, cool. So that's what my floor looks like. Still pretty flat, right? I would say it's still pretty flat. It doesn't look like anything right now. It just looks like a flat picture on this on the tiles. I need to fix this. And the great thing about Blender is it has the ability for us to create something that looks like bumpy surfaces, right? So does Unity, by the way. So notice on the right, I'm still in texture mode on the texture tab here. On the bottom of this, right? Notice that there is a diffuse channel, a shading channel, a specular channel, and a geometry channel, right? Right now I'm looking at the color channel, which gives me this pattern, right? If I click the specular channel, that's going to give me shininess, right? I don't want shininess yet. If I click the shading channel, it'll actually shade or brighten or dull what I'm seeing here. If I click the geometry channel, right, it does is it gives me what looks like a bump by extrapolating the edges and the darkness inside my picture. It creates an illusion of depth. Let's try this. So I click on normal. When it does that, it gives me the illusion, but it's too much. It's too crackly. And if I go in here, I can see a very good representation of what it's going to look like at the end. This is too much because my normal amount is 1. I want to tone this right down, and you can actually tune this down, you know, so that it makes it more by eye. You can see that this is going to be something that you want to see. Something like, you don't want to be negative, but something about 0.0 something, 0.06, 0.05, so 0.05, something like that. So it gives a bit of bump, right? A bit of bump, but not too much. Let me just go back into perspective mode so you can get an idea of what it looks like, right? Again, this is kind of an art, right? So you have to kind of figure this out by doing, right? And again, I can modify this normal map. If this isn't enough, I can add additional. So I can go 0.06, let's say, right? To give me a little bit more bump on this thing, right? And if I don't like that, let's try that again. 0.06, right? A little bit more. I think that's probably good, right? To give me a little bit more of thing. If I tone this too much, if I go up too much, it looks too much, right? I don't want this much. I want it to be a lot less than this because this is too dramatic, right? So 0.06, 0.07, something like that. That might be about right. 0.07. Okay, cool. Okay, now that I've got that, I want to add my specularity now. And the way I can do that is, of course, I can click on intensity. Now this gives me a little bit of shine on the rocks. Again, one intensity is too intense. It's too much specularity, and I want to tone this down a lot more. So I can tone it down until I see just a little bit of shine, right, but not a lot of shine. So again, I can do it by eye, and as I tone it up a little bit, my thinking is it's probably going to be something around 0.45 from what I'm seeing in this particular texture. But every texture is a little bit different, 0.45, something like that. Okay, cool. So I've got my specularity, I've got my normal map, I've got my color, and everything else to see what it looks like. Okay, cool. I like it. Let's add in the walls to see what it looks like with the walls in place. So I'm going to put the walls back, right, and kind of zoom out a little bit, right? Not bad. So here's my walls. This is what the walls are going to look like right now. And what I want to do now is I want to use the same technique, but on the walls, right? So I want to put the walls back in, and I don't care about this piece. So I'm going to kind of go into object mode now. And I'm going to get rid of the floor because I don't care about the floor anymore. Now, the walls are trickier, right? The walls actually should be probably done last. So let's just do, you know what, instead of the walls, just rethinking this again, let's do the rooftop. Bring the rooftop back and get rid of the floor. And all I'm doing is I'm not looking at the floor. It's the same. It's just separated. That's all it is. So there's my rooftop. I want to align this so it's aligned properly. Remember, I don't want to do it this way, but I do want to align it so that the X is this way and the Y is going up. That's kind of the right alignment to use. Okay, again, I have some stuff that's missing for me to use this. I need a material. So here on my rooftop, I have this floor material, but that doesn't make any sense. I want to use a floor material for my roof. That doesn't make sense at all. I want to use a new material, right? So again, if you look at my slots, here's all my slots. One thing is I have to select my object. So I'm going to select all. There's my object, right? And in here, I want to create a new material. So click New. And I want to make my new material called Rooftop. Same name as my actual object, so we're not confused. I want to tone down the specularity here, so it's no specularity, it's matte, right? And I want to go to my texture. So this is doing what I did last time. I want to create a new texture slot, and I want to call this texture the same name as I've got in the bottom on the top, which is Crackles. Crackles. There we go. Here's my Crackles, right? My texture on the top. And I want to load it in. So I'm going to click the Open button over here under Image, right? So I'm going to go to my desktop where I have all my textures right now and load it in as Crackles. There we go. Crackles, Open. There it is. So there's my Crackle image. Kind of a weird image, but it looks like it's like kind of a decayed rooftop, right? Or whatever. Maybe that's the effect I want. Maybe not. But it's not showing up. Why? I have to unwrap it. Now I could unwrap it here like this by pressing Tab, right? Selecting everything and pressing Unwrap, right? If I unwrap it, it's going to show up here immediately, right? That may be what I want and maybe not. So in order for me to see what it looks like, I got to kind of zoom in to see what it looks like if I'm happy with that. And you know what? Just like that, I think this is good enough for me, right? I don't think there's anything else I need to do here. One thing I want to do is go through that whole specularity and bump map thing. And I want to go down here and check this out, right? So notice that I want to select everything. And again, I want to click on geometry, go to my normals, and now I see that my normals are really rough, right? That's a really rough kind of look to it, right? I want to drop this normal down again, but maybe not as much as before. I don't want to go negative, but I want to be pretty rough looking. So maybe something like 0.98. So kind of a rough top of the surface, almost like it's been ripped off, right? 0.98 is good. And if you want to see what it looks like, it looks kind of like this. So really kind of a rough surface on the top. And it's random, right? See how random it's kind of across everyone is a little bit different? That's pretty cool. And I want to add my specularity back. So I want to click on my intensity for my specularity. And that's pretty shiny, right? Because it's 1. And I can kind of reduce that so it's not as shiny. Still gives me a little bit of shine from the light sources, but not a lot of it. Let's say 0.2. Okay, so I've got my specularity and everything else. My rooftop should be done. Okay, nice and easy. Okay, cool. Let's hide my rooftop. So we'll go back into object mode, hide my rooftop, bring back my walls, and this is the hard part. My walls are weird, hey? My walls are weird because, you know what? The problem with I'm right-clicking to select it, by the way. I've got 2 sides of my walls. And I want to see something for here. I see that there's some sides that are the inside, and there's some walls that are on the outside. In order for me to illustrate my problem even more, I want to bring back my lamp. My lamp, right, is right here right now. This is where my lamp is sitting. And just so I can see everything, I'm going to replicate my lamp a couple ways. I'm going to move it over here, and Shift D for duplicate across the Y-axis here, just to pull it across so I can see my thing lit up. Same thing with, I'm gonna put a couple more lamps over here. So I'm gonna Shift D to duplicate, across the X-axis. I'm gonna kind of go over here like this. Shift D to duplicate across the Y-axis. Kind of put that over here. So I got a few lamps now, right? Notice I have a few lamps in the scene. And I'm lighting everything up so I can see it all. And if I can't see, I care about the outer walls, not the inner walls. So notice how there's a wall on the outside. I need to do that because when I unwrap, I don't want to be fooled because this is where things can really mess up in Unity if you don't see things properly, right? So sometimes I add enough light so I can see everything all around, all the way around, right? And I'm not, like I said, I'm not fooled by what it looks like. I want to light up as much as I can because what looks like to be dark might be light, and so on, and I don't want that. There we go. So I kind of lit up the entire area around the walls. It's important to light up your scene. Now, I'm not going to pass the lights into Unity, so it doesn't really matter here. It's just for me to look at this thing. Okay, cool. Let's align this thing like it should be aligned with the X towards the right and the Y on the top. And let's zoom in now and modify the wall so I can see some parts of the walls here. Now remember, when I select this, all of the walls are selected equally, and this is a problem. If I press Tab and go in, they're all separate. This is a different kind of unwrapping that I need to do compared to what I did before. Before, when I unwrapped everything, it was a flat thing. All the objects were flat. These are all standing up this way. So I've got to be very careful to how I do this properly. And there's a certain way of unwrapping. I've got to do some testing here to unwrap this. I'm going to go back into the UV editing mode to make this happen. So here's my UV editing. And notice that these are the these objects that I have unwrapped, and they look like this, right? They're all selected, right? And this is my texture. This is wrong. This isn't the texture I want to use. I want to use, not crackles, right? I want to use the other one. Let me go back to my default for a second. I forgot to do a couple things, right? In my haste, in my excitement to show you guys, right? I want to create I got to create another material. No material, no texture. Remember, we talked about this. So I'm going to get a new material in there. Material is going to be named walls, right? I'm going to turn down the specularity so it's nothing. I'm going to go back and create another texture in the new texture slot. And I'm going to call this one brick old rounded, right? Because that's what the texture is. So double click, brick old rounded. Here we are. Brick old rounded is around there. And I want to load it up like we did last time. So I'm going to click open. I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to click brick old rounded and press open image. Okay, I've got my image there, brick old rounded, but I need to unwrap it. So now I'm going to go back into that UV editing mode. And I don't want to look at this one. I want to look at, and I can select the other one that I've opened up here by clicking this button here in UV editing mode and going to brick old rounded, which is going to show me this object. Okay, wow, brick old rounded looks like it's pretty dead. Well, how come it's looking like that? Well, I got to make sure there's two things happening. So tab in, this is what the actual object looks like. And when I select everything, so deselect all, right? Select all, I'm selecting my object. Tab in, this looks pretty, pretty difficult to see. How come? Because of the way this is laid out, that's why. Right? So what I need to do is press U for unwrap, and this time I'm going to go unwrap. If I go unwrap by itself, it's going to show this, right? Look, that ain't right. That's going to make it look really weird because what it's trying to do is flatten everything out. So that isn't right. So if I go on this side and press unwrap again, I can reset, which is going to put it back to this again. Don't worry about that. It's full. It's full because they are all overlapping each other right now. That's what's happening. All right, let's try it again. So I'm going to kind of UV unwrap, and let's go do a smart UV unwrap. Okay, and click, just leave everything as normal, press OK. It's a little better, but if I look to see what it really does, it's giving me some weird shapes, right? It's giving me some weird bricks going on, and they're all random, and they don't kind of gel with each other and everything else. So if I select all these, you can see how they're not all shaped correctly. Some of them are wider, some of them are longer. Something's wrong, right? Okay, so that's not the way I want to do it. So I'm going to deselect all. And I want to go to select all. I'm going to go to U and reset everything back to normal. Okay, so how do I do this? Any suggestions? I know how to do it, but anyone has a suggestion to what to do? The right thing to do is to select some at a time, right? And then do just a regular unwrap. So an example of this would be, I want to deselect all, click the ones I want, like this from a certain angle. So there's these ones. And notice how they all kind of line up together, right? But what I want to do here, the ones that I can see, I got to be very careful what I select, because I'm selecting ones that are on the bottom and the sides and all this kind of stuff, see? By the way, the reason why this is happening is because this is on right here. I can turn that off, so I can't do that anymore, right? So I'm going to just deselect all and try that again. So if I select one, it's the same size as my screen here, right? And that's like one brick, like what's one side. If I select two, they layer on top of each other. This isn't that bad, right? I'm just telling you this is what can happen, right? So 3, 4, well, let me get rid of those, sorry, get rid of those. These ones are all layering on top of each other, which means they're going to use the exact same pattern, right? They're going to repeat, rinse and repeat, right? So I'm kind of choosing all these patterns. That's why it's getting whiter and whiter, because it's just more orange being pasted on. So imagine if all of these were going to be unwrapped first. So I'm going to press unwrap, and then if I press unwrap, I get this. Now, notice how some of them are this way, and some of them are this way, and all this kind of stuff. That's bad, but I can figure out which ones are which. I want all of them to be this way, up and down, right? So that they all look the same. So if I select this one, right? Well, let's deselect all of them over here. And if I select the ones that I selected, this one is wrong, and this one is wrong, these two, right? So I can actually select these two, right? These two here, and I can right-click. I can press U and reset those ones. So those ones are gone. But these ones, they're still here because these are the ones that I selected, right? Like I made all these ones come to life, right? These ones are okay because they're all facing upwards. It's important. Okay, you might think, Tom, you're crazy. It's too much work. It's a lot of work. But the thing is, now I can make these larger. So I'm press A for all, and I can press S for select, and I can make them grow so that way the brick kind of highlights this portion of the screen. I have to remember the settings, but this is approximately what I want. To understand what I've done here, right, so you can see it, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to zoom into this to these bricks. And notice how I've got part of my brick here that has this pattern now. See? Kind of grows around. Other parts of my brick look weird, right? The ones that aren't right look off, right? They've been kind of extrapolated a little bit different. They have the bottom row here, but something's not right, and there's a bit of a repeat going on. Okay, let's go back to my pattern. Oop. It's important to see this the right way. There we go. Okay, so I've got those front bricks, but I didn't do these ones. So let's do these ones. So I'm gonna right-click this one, and right-click this one. I've got them there. I'm gonna press unwrap, and then unwrap. Notice how now they're aligned properly. Now they're a little big, and what I probably should do is kind of make it so that they scale down a little bit because they're going to be different than these ones. If you care, you can do that. Me, not care. Right? I'm going to go this one, this one, this one, this one. Notice where they appear, right? And this one, this one. You can see how they're appearing now, and if they're appearing upside down or not, because I've started to unwrap them. And you know what? I'm pretty happy with that size. Maybe a little bit bigger. Remember, I made them a little bit bigger last time, so something like that. The reason why I'm doing these facings is because that's where the biggest errors appear. So I'm going to do this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and they all look like they're on top of each other. Let's do an unwrap there, unwrap, and let's scale that up. So about here, and they all look the same now. This wall, and then this one, this one, this one. They're all on top of each other. Let's do an unwrap. And do an unwrap there. That's pretty good. Let's make it a little bigger. As you can see, they're just kind of a little bigger like that. This one and this one, unwrap. And now these ones are messed. They're messed, man. They're totally messed up like this. What can I do with these ones? I can rotate them too. I can go rotate, again, and make them so that they appear the right way. I got to be careful because if I make the bottom part appear in the wrong place, it'll be at the top, right? Which could happen. So the way to do that is to preview by going in here, zooming in, and you guys are glazing out already. You guys are like, Tom, it's too much. Killing me, Tom, right? So if you're happy with the way it is, and maybe you are, maybe you aren't, some pieces that are off, it's okay, right? Because again, I'm just showing you how to do this. If you really took the time, this is why graphic artists get paid what they get paid. They take the time to put all this together. Okay, cool. I've got some kind of layout. That's okay. Let's go back. I'll leave it as is. And I'm going to go back to my default scene. There it is. And I'm going to do the same tricks I did last time. Okay? I'm going to go with my, my geometry. I don't want it to be so much because that's too much roughness. It looks too rough. Let's go zoom in here to see what it looks like. That's way too much, right? So we can reduce that so it looks like brick, right? But not too much like brick. So maybe even like 0.0. Again, I probably would say 0.04, something that you get a bit of brick shape, even less, even less than that. 0.01, something that gives you a little bit of shape to it. Looks like it's that there's bumps around it, but not too much. You want to be subtle, right? Specularity, you want to drop that shine down. So there's a bit of shine, but nothing so that's too spectacular. Yeah, maybe about that. Okay, cool. So I've got shine. I've got all this stuff going on, right? Let's bring everything back. right? So I've got that part and the roof, and this is my final product, right? That I've got going on. That's not bad. Some pieces are still not happy with. Like I'm not happy with the color of this. This is kind of different than these colors, but they're supposed to be. I can color it though. If I want to add shading, I could do that by selecting my rooftop, right? So I'm gonna go back to tab. I'm gonna go back to my rooftop, right? So I look at my rooftop here, and I can definitely add some shading, right? By choosing some of these objects here. So I can really shade it down a little bit more, make it a little darker. There we go. So I can drop that darkness down a lot more to make it not as dramatic. Okay, cool. There you go, a little bit better. I still think it's a little too shiny for me. I even think that's too shiny. So the intensity of the specularity, I think that's got to drop even more. That's a little better. Okay, cool. How does this look when I export this thing, right? Because this is pretty good. It looks like a pretty good scene and looks nice, right? How do I do that? There's some tricks. And the one thing is you got to look at each of the objects. So my rooftop, if I look down, and this is under my texture, there's a bit of a button here. Notice that this button right here for my source, right? It's on the desktop when I click onto it, right? What I do when I click onto it is it includes it in the blend file, which is important. Although I'll tell you right now, it still won't work properly, but it will map nice, okay? Later on, we'll talk about this. My walls, I want to do the same thing. Little button here for my source. And I want to do the same thing for my, my floor. Floor, click on that. So all of them are mapped. Now let's save my object. I'm going to save it, which is very important, on the desktop. If I don't save it on the desktop, some weird things happen. So I'm going to file, I guess deselect all, select all. I'm going to file, save as. All right, first of all, I'll save it at the blend. I'll save the blend file. That's the first thing I need to do. And I'm going to do that on my desktop, right? And I'm going to call this maze, right? Or maze tile, right? Dot blend. I'm going to save the blender file. There we go. So there's my maze tile, right? Now I also want to export this thing. I want to show you the difference between exporting it and using my blend file. Okay, let's try that. So I'm going to go File, Export. And the great way to do this thing for Unity is to export it in FBX mode. FBX is the standard way we export things from Unity and from Maya. Go to FBX mode. And now I got to choose where it's going to be. So desktop. And I'm going to call this maze tile.fbx and export. Now notice on the left, this is important. Before I choose my export features, on the left, there's a bunch of different objects, things here. For example, my scale is really important. My scale is 1. My forward is Z is up. Z is forward. Y is up. This is good. This is all aligned with Unity. This is good. But before I do this, one thing I know what I need to do here is in Unity, we're not dealing in Blender units. We're dealing in meters. So it's a good idea to change my scale from, or my measurements from this Blender units to meters. And the way to do that, of course, is to hit the world or whatever. Let me see if this, I want to go to my numeric transform here for a second to show you the difference. Here's, right now it's in Blender units, right? And you can see 8, scale is 8, dimensions are 16 Blender units, right? Well, what I want to do is I want to change the scale from none, so it's the third one in from the left, the scene, right? I want to change it from none, I want to go to metric. And now notice that it's 16 meters by 16 meters. This is good. If I change this scale and if I save the blend file like this, so I just save the blend file, it's going to save that measurement. And now when I take it into Unity, we're going to be good to go. Now, 2 things to know about Unity when you import. Unity takes Blender files natively. You do a Blender file, you drag and drop it into Unity, it's in the way it is, right? It also does the export. Let's do the export too, just to show you the difference. File, export, FBX. Okay, there's nothing for me to select here. I'm going to select everything as is, right? And click export. Now notice that my maze tile FBX is on my desktop. I'm going to click export. Okay, so everything's exported. I'm going to save my blend file one more time, just so that there's nothing here. I'm going to close Blender. Whew, lots of work, right? And the reason why I'm going to get rid of some of these things I was testing with, so I'm going to get rid of this one, yes, in Unity, because I had that in there today, and this one, I was testing with that one too. And what I want to do now is I want to pull in, and then I'll stop for a break. I want to pull in the Blender file and the FBX file. Let's look at the FBX file first. Remember, there's two ways to do this. I can import by using the import function, or I can go here and I can take my Blender file, which is this my FBX file. So where's my FBX file? So here's my blend file, right? I see that one. Where's my FBX file? There, right? If I take my FBX file, this is it's a shape, or it's not a prefab, it's not a texture, it's not a material. This is a mesh, right? Or an object, if you will, right? So I want to create a new folder to put that in. So I'm going to go here to assets. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this thing like meshes. Okay? And inside my meshes or shapes, I want to take that FBX file and drag it in. Let's see what happens when I do that. Just drag and drop, right? Well, two things happen. I get my maze tile object. I get a camera, my floor, my lamp, 1, 2, 3, 4, everything there, right? I got my walls, my floor, my rooftop. Look at it, it's all there, and my walls. All those pieces are there. Notice that my walls are brick old rounded, right? That's what it's called. But where's my materials? Here's my materials, and I don't see any shading whatsoever. I don't see any of my textures. Even my textures are empty, right? Let's go back to meshes, and I wanted to show you this, right? Because if I was to drag and drop my floor or my whole maze tile, let's take my whole maze tile, this whole thing, and drag and drop it onto this thing, into my hierarchy. And I get this, right? Notice how it's the maze tile, but I got no texturing or whatsoever. It's the right size, though, for my dude, right? Like if I was to step into my maze, I'm good to go. I've created a more complex object, right? Here's something to note. Note that in my maze tile, I have other tiles. I have my camera that comes along with it, my floor, and does the floor or the camera or the lamp or any of this stuff, well, how about the rooftop, does it have any kind of collider? The answer is no. So I gotta be careful on how to do all that, right, when I put the collider in place as well. Okay, that's one. Two, let's try the second way of doing it. So I'm gonna kind of get here and delete this one. And then let's go and let's just kill all this stuff that I just got. So it's going to just delete those two things, delete. And this one. There we go. And now let's drag the blend file in. So I'm going to go blend. So I'm going to go back out to the desktop. Grab my blend file, mazetile.blend, and drag it in. And now what do I got? Okay, well, it's very similar, yeah? I've got my blend, my maze tile. And if I click on my floor, I got my floor, my walls, I got my walls, my rooftop, and in my materials, I've got my brick old rounded and all the same stuff. Do I have any textures? No. Did I do anything different? Let's see. So let's go and grab my maze tile. And again, one thing you notice for once when I do the blend file, my maze tile does not include, right? Does not include cameras. It does not include lights. Nothing like that. Just the maze tile itself was the one that got imported. So if I drag this in, I see my maze tile. I can still pull it up like we did before. Everything remains the same, right? It has an animator built in. That's funny. That's new for my blend file. And each of my floor, my rooftop, and my walls has a material that's kind of default material that's put onto it. So what do I need to do to make this all work? I need my textures, yeah? So let's pull them in. So go back to my up here, go to my desktop, and I have my three textures. I have my crackles texture, right, here it is, this one. I have my, let's wait for that, gravel cobble, pull that in, right? I have my, what else, what am I missing? My brick old rounded, bring that in. I'm showing you, so you know. So if you're watching my things and you're, oh, Blender is nice and easy, even Maya, same. If I was to do this, the great thing that we did, even if we did all spent this, because I've got a UV map, it remembers everything, which is really cool. So that means that if I go like this, if I say my brick old rounded, this is my brick old rounded, and I kind of drag and drop this thing into my brick old rounded, I get my texture back. Because Blender remembers, right? Or Unity knows what Blender wanted, right? There's some extra information. Same thing with my rooftop. My rooftop, I can get crackles in there, right? And my floor, here's my floor, right? is the brick, what's it called, my gravel cobble, right? So I'm going to select my floor, gravel cobble, right? The right size is there. Got my size. One thing it missed was all my other information. Like, for example, it didn't grab my all my other stuff. Let's look at the shader and see what we're getting. So from gravel cobble, notice that I have an albedo and I have a standard shader. What you can do for all these ones, if I click on all these three, notice I can't do each one all together. Each one of them has their own shader. And what I want to do is I want to move from standard shader to specular. The same thing with my rooftop. So standard, I'm going to go to specular, floor, standard to specular. Made all these changes. Now notice that the albedo's there. There's a specular channel, a normal map, and everything else. Well, this is nice and easy. Now we're gonna make you feel nicely about this one, right? Here's my rooftop. Let's go to my floor. Floor is gravel cobble, right? I'm gonna take my gravel cobble and put it into my normal map. Now I've got a bit of a bump, right? Let's take a look and see what that looks like for a second. I got a bit of a bump in my floor, right? All I've done is I've just dragged it into my normal map. I need to click Fix Now because it's going to make it into a normal map. Watch. Now it looks kind of grayish. That's okay, right? Let me undo that change. There we go. My specular setup. And I want to go back into this to see what it is. It's brick old rounded. That's the one it was. Let me just do that again for a second. And you can always do this again. You can grab the brick old rounded and put it in there. So, oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. Gravel cobble and put it in there. And if I mess it up like this, that's okay. I can unexport it. I can import again. So if I go import import again or re-import all, I can re-import this one, right? So re-import this one. So that's going to re-import my gravel cobble back to the way it was. And now it's modified it in Unity. Unity's actually modified this thing to make it a specular map, right? I'm not going to worry too much about it. See how it's in albedo, right? Okay, I can also do the same thing. If I take my gravel cobble and I put it into my normal map, I can get a little bit of height. I can also take gravel cobble and pull it into my my specularity, which is my metallic. Let's pull this into this one. And I can reduce the size of my smoothness as much as I want to make it less smooth, less specular. I can choose my normal map so it's like 0.2, right? So it's not as harsh. And I've lost my color, but I'm not really that concerned. I could also just drag and drop it again. If I want to fix this, by the way, guys, delete this one, right? Gravel cobble deleted. Go back to my desktop, and remember it hasn't been modified, right? And I take my gravel cobble again, re-download it in there, right? And it's not going to mess it up, right? So if I go back to my floor again, and I'm again in my standard setup, make sure I'm doing the right thing. Here it is. Now what I probably wanted to do, and this is where I messed up, is my gravel cobble, what I want to do is I want to press Command or Control D to duplicate and make another one off of the first one. Just call it something different, like N for normal map, right? And once I've done this, I can go back into my floor and I can drag and drop this normal map in here. Then I can fix, and it's not going to affect anything, right? And I have two of them now, right? Gravel cobble N, and I can do the same thing for my specular, like dragging it in there under specular. But I'm not going to do that. Let's just duplicate it again. So Command D, Control D on the PC, and make this an S for specular. So I could have my specular map, my normal map, and everything else for each of the objects. And Unity does a great job of taking care of that for you. So there's my floor, and drag my specular in there under specularity, right? And it adds in a specular quality, like a shininess to it, which I can drag in, right? It's kind of a shininess to it. And the same thing, if I don't like it, I can get rid of it, no problem. Let's do the same thing for the rooftop. So the rooftop is already there. I want to add in some other stuff I could. Let's actually just leave it alone because I don't want to go too much in detail and we're kind of running out of time. Okay, so now I want to make it work, right, this thing. I don't need an animator, so let's get rid of this component here. Remove my component, my maze tile. I've got my floor, I got my rooftop, I got my walls. And what I want to do with each one of these things is add its own collider, right? Not on the maze tile itself, but on each one of these sub-items. Why? They have different shapes. My walls especially. So here's my floor, right? I want to kind of zoom in here. Here's my mesh renderer. And I'm going to add a new component. It's going to be a physics material. It's going to be a mesh collider, not a box collider. Here's my mesh collider. I'm not going to make it convex for now. Here's my rooftop, same thing. I'm going to kind of go in there, add another collider. So I'm going to go physics, right? I'm going to add a mesh collider for that, right? And I'm going to do the same thing with my walls. I'm going to go into here and go add component, physics, mesh collider, right? So again, it's important to do all this stuff because if you don't do this properly, then it won't look right. It won't respond properly. Cool. Now let's get rid of my ground. So get rid of my ground, delete it. And now this is my object, my maze tile. Let's put this at 0, 0, 0, so to the beginning, right? And where's my character, my player? He's right here, right? Remember where I wanted to start my guy. So I'm going to kind of move this around. I wanted to start it over here, right? This is where my guy is supposed to start over here, right? Now I'm kind of oriented. Look at the top here. X and Z is what I want to look at, which should be like this. This is what my real tile is going to look like, right? My guy is going to be here over here. This is where it's going to be. I want to start over here and move over here. So I'm going to rotate this whole tile, right? I'm going to rotate this tile by let's say 90 degrees or 180 degrees. Now I'm going to rotate it across the y-axis. So if I go 90, right, that's one turn. And if I go 180, that's another turn. Now notice what I've done. I've rotated. It means I can duplicate my tile, rotate it, attach it together, and create my maze by tile, by tiling everything together. Okay? So now I want to put my character really quickly on the edge of my maze. Let's do that. So, and zoom into my character and kind of zoom out a little bit more and drag him over here and put him on the edge. And just to make sure that he's not inside the edge, I'm just going to zoom around so I can see what happens here. Right? There we are. And let's play the game. Let's see if this works. If I don't fall through the maze. Look, there we are. So there's my maze, and I can't go through the walls. And I've got a really cool looking level where I can get on top of the roof, right? And I can go over here, and I can fall, push this thing off there, right? And do this, and I can push this off the edge. Come on. Or I can fall to oblivion. Oh, right? What do you think? Maze tile. Now here's the beauty of this maze tile. So you guys can take this away, right? Maze tile, prefab. Prefab, maze tile. Maze tile, maze tile. Maze tile, maze tile. All right, let's zoom away, right, from this maze tile stuff. And let's take the first one and let's drag it over to the right, right? And let's zoom around here for a second. And I want to rotate this one, this second maze tile. Let's rotate it, right, by, instead of minus 180, let's go to 90 and put it back, right? Now what I want to do is I want to use, I'm selected here, right? So I want to use V. By selecting this tile, right, I'm going to use my V select mode. Notice how I can V snap by pressing the V button to the edges, right? And what I can do is I can pull the edges tight, right? So now they're snapped together. I got to be careful not to undo my work because I snapped my floor. That's not what I want. Undo. I want my whole maze tile to snap, right? So if I press V on my maze tile, it's hard, but I know that they're 16 by 16, yeah? So I can do one of these. I can say, well, 16. Right, so I can go to this is my second one. So I go to this one, right? Move over, right? Because that's the size I made it, right? I made it 16 by 16, yeah? So I can do that kind of stuff. Let's move this over a little bit, zoom in, press my second one, rotate out. As an example, select this one. And again, I'm gonna kind of come up like over here like this, right? So it kind of snaps too. Notice that I should put this at 16 and rotate it approximately by, let's say, minus 90 just to make it different, right? Move this around. You know what I'm going, right? And here's this one, this last one, this third one. I'm gonna move this up and I'm gonna move this over. And I know that both of these have to be 16s. So 16 this way, and 16 this way. And now I have my maze, pretty lickety split, and I'll leave that one the way it is. Yeah, I know it's crazy. I'll leave this the way it is, and instead of, I'll leave it at 180. That's pretty cool. So one is kind of the same, but it's kind of kitty corner. Actually, I'll maybe move it to 180 itself. Let's make it a little bit different. Maybe not. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe move it to minus 180 like it was. Minus 180. Maybe minus 90. You can decide, right? I mean, it's got to work, right? Okay, cool. Let's play my character now. My character hasn't moved, right? So I can actually be able to play my guy now, no problem, right? Okay, here's my maze now. Let's see. Yeah. Big space in the middle for fighting, right? We'll go over here like this. I got a pretty good maze, right, to try and find the exit. Now we need some exit tiles. Now you can see there's a division here, right? But there's nothing is too funky. Like we didn't make any mistakes. And I can fall off the maze and do all kinds of other stuff. Guys, this is one piece to your level. And if you notice, if I press escape and I go out, how big is this level? It's like 32 by 32. That's how big this floor tile is, 32 meters. Not very big, right? I can keep on adding additional ones. I can make another maze, another tile that's totally different, and add more materials to my prefabs to make my landscape the way I want, right? I can also add things like ramps, different kinds of landscapes and everything else to build out my world. And this is not including, which we're going to add over the next few weeks, we haven't included things like pickups, enemies, weapons, sounds, explosions, nothing. This is why this game is worth more than the other ones. Questions before I pause for a short break? Then I want to show you a couple more things. I could do that too. I could add the wall. There's all kinds of things you can do, right? Let me stop right now and put it up to GitHub so you have what I have, okay? So you can compare mine with yours. All right.